Welcome, everyone. We're so glad that you could join us today. We are really excited. We've been looking forward to this webinar for quite a while on building a magnetic employer brand. This is something that our members have told us that they are looking for, that attracting employees is an ongoing issue, that that it's a big issue in our industry to not only draw employees in, but like keep them there, build a good environment that helps them stay within the industry. And we're just so excited to have Envol with us. So Brianna is here to present on behalf of Envol. And I have just a little bio here that I'm going to read. It says Brianna is on a mission to eliminate barriers for businesses. She founded Envol to help business leaders achieve their goals through impactful people solutions. As an experienced entrepreneur with an extensive background in organizational development, leadership, coaching, business strategy, recruitment, and people solutions, Brianna has helped hundreds of companies hire and retain thousands of employees across North America. Brianna is also the CEO and co-founder of Pocketed, which is an intelligent grant platform that's helped over 14,000 companies across North America access more than 100 million in grants, tax credits, and incentives. So that's really impressive. Thanks for joining us, Brianna.
So glad to be here. Thank you for having me. I know this does feel like it's been a long time coming. That was a great intro, Rebecca. Is it okay? Are you okay if I jump right in? Can I jump right in?
Please do. Yeah, please do.
Awesome.
Go for it.
Perfect. So I've got my colleague Erica here with us as well. But for those of you who haven't met us before, I'm Brianna. I'm the CEO and founder of Envol. And today we're talking all about employer branding. A few quick housekeeping items. This session is going to be recorded. So I do believe you're going to have access to that recording following the session. Yeah, I'm getting a nod, so that's perfect. So I know some of you may have to jump in and out for all of the other things that happen when you're running your businesses and in your roles day to day. Please know that you'll have access to the content. And we encourage you to share your questions through the Q&A. We'd love to make sure we have time to answer your own questions about your businesses and recognize that there may be sensitive questions as well that you prefer to speak with us one-on-one about. My colleague Erica is here and she's going to help to share some links and more information to support what I'm sharing with you throughout the session in the chat. And right now I'll ask her to drop an email address. So if you do have questions that you're not comfortable asking in this format, no problem. Reach out to us directly. Our team's happy to jump on a call with you at any time. So let's dive in. Envol, if you haven't heard of us, we are a people solutions firm supporting organizations of all sizes and varieties across North America. Our bread and butter is in the blue collar space. And candidly, that's a little bit selfish for me. I was born and raised in a family business in trucking. My family business hauls chemicals across the Pacific Northwest. So I've always gravitated to things blue collar, construction, building, engineering, transportation, logistics, you name it. And have seen my entire life the challenges that exist in this space, but also the compounding factors that you are all dealing with today that are new and rapidly evolving and adding layers of complexity and difficulty for you around labor shortages and increased competition for talent, people simply having more options for different types of roles. And that's made the pressure for all of us harder than it's ever been before. So we are going to cover a lot of information, but I think before we do, laying the groundwork that there's 22,000 additional new employees required in the building sector by 2027. Huge booms in the market, ongoing turnover, rapidly aging workforce, all of these factors are compounding and bringing external pressures that you are having to navigate. But there's also a big opportunity for you. And for anyone here today, you're taking an important step in how do we differentiate? How do we stand out? How do we give ourselves the best opportunity possible to be that employer of choice, to be a compelling place for folks to work and actually compete successfully for talent in this competitive market, both for acquiring and attracting new talent, but also for retaining the talent that you do have. And I think that was well articulated. How do we keep folks in our businesses and in the sector? So there's a component of that is, an industry-wide approach that associations like WRLA are helping to tackle, but at an individual company level as well. How do we stand out even within this broader context? We've got a lot to cover, a lot of ground to cover, and we're going to do our best to cover it all and make sure we do have time to answer your questions. So again, share those questions in the Q&A. Today, we're going to cover what is employer branding, how to understand your employer brand, how employer branding impacts recruitment, bringing your employer brand to life, Key takeaways and actionable next steps. Our hope is always that you leave here today with clarity on something you can do that will make a difference in your business right now. And that's going to be one of the key things you'll take away today, is that there really is no silver bullet. It is about getting started and doing things iteratively. And some of that does look small. And I would say my experience in the last almost 8 years of building a business exclusively in the employer branding and people space is that everyone's looking for this one grandiose solution, much like with diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility. And it happens to be a series of smaller actions that are going to get you to the best outcome. So we're going to give you lots of examples of those today. And then, of course, time to answer your questions. So we're going to start with an understanding of what is employer branding. In today's competitive market, people have options. We know that. They can choose from a ton of opportunities. They can choose from different industries. So how do we stand out from the crowd and best attract talent? Well, that brings us to employer branding. An employer brand is how your business shows up in the talent marketplace as an employer. That's true for your current employees from a retention standpoint, but it's also true for prospective employees. And your employer brand is a living thing. It is present in your interactions with job seekers. It's in your company culture. It's a representation of your company culture, your career site. It's literally everything about how you live, breathe, and operate in your business. Think of it as your company's career dating profile would be another way to think about it. That makes top talent swipe right for anyone here that's ever been on any of those new types of dating apps. And a strong employer brand story is going to help you compete effectively and position yourself as an employer of choice. It impacts whether qualified candidates are going to choose to interact with you at all, let alone choose to ultimately accept an offer from you. But it's important to note that your employer brand is not the same thing as a mission statement. So that who you are, what you're working toward, the mission for the business, it's a piece of this, but it's not the same thing. It is not a mission statement. So why do we want to have an employer brand? Well, it's going to help you attract top talent. It becomes a magnet, drawing in the most qualified candidates that align with your brand the most and that want to work for you. It's not enough to find people that just want a job. I know sometimes we're all in that moment of I desperately need to hire, and that does feel like what I need to prioritize is getting a body to fill the seat. And I will admit, sometimes there are times when that has to be our priority as an organization to meet our deadlines and our client obligations. But in a perfect world, we're finding folks that actually want to work at our businesses, that are choosing to opt into you as an employer, and that are aligned with the bigger picture of what you're working toward. It also absolutely helps to reduce your recruitment costs. So if you think about traditional recruiting, casting as wide a net as possible to try to catch enough fish that you can choose the winners out of that batch of fish. Well, with employer branding, we're absolutely trying to increase your talent pipeline, so increase the number of candidates applying to work in your business, but also, again, that quality and relevance of who is applying to work in your business. And then finally, it does have a huge impact on retention. When we got our start in employer branding, everyone looked at it as flashy ads. That's what people thought of with employer branding. It's about an image, it's about a campaign, it's about an ad, it's about a slogan. And those things are manifestations of how you bring your employer brand to life, but they're exactly that. They're how you bring your employer brand to life and activate it. It's not actually the core of what your employer brand is all about. Your employer brand is based on your people. It's based on your business. It's based on authentic representation of your culture, how you show up in your business day to day, what it looks like to lead. We're going to go into a lot more info about those components, but it is so deeply rooted in who you are as a business that it is innately a tool for retention. It's not only about recruitment. It's about how are we telling the story of our people? How does this show up in how we treat our people, how we develop, promote, lead our people? And that, of course, as we all know as business leaders, has a direct correlation to our ability to retain the right people in our businesses. So what is the business impact of a poor employer brand? Why do you actually need to invest in one? Do I actually have to spend the money on this? And it's not always going to be expensive. So I'll also flag that for you. There are lots of things that you can do, including what we're going to cover today, that won't cost you a dime. But do I need to invest in my employer brand? The short answer is yes. The longish answer is that a poor employer brand can have a significantly negative impact on your business in several ways. It's going to reduce your candidate pool. It's going to increase your recruitment costs, lower your quality of hires, decrease employee engagement. It can absolutely lead to a higher turnover rate when there's that misalignment and have a negative customer impact. Because if you have higher turnover in any customer facing roles, we all know what that does. In your back office, when you have high turnover, it impacts the experience your customers have in buying from you. So it has huge business impacts, including difficulty attracting talent in the future and impacting ultimately your brand representation. So there are huge, huge impacts of not having your employer brand well thought out and or doing it poorly. And this is true too. And I think it's important to flag that is sometimes you see beautiful employer brands where you see gorgeous career sites, beautiful advertising, but then like a 1.2 score on any sort of employee review site. So those disconnects are real, and you want to make sure that you're being thoughtful about that, which leads us into pitfalls to avoid. We see a lot of how employers are creating, communicating, and living their employer brands. So we see lots of things that folks get wrong. And I'm going to share with you 3 common pitfalls that we encourage you to avoid when it comes to developing your employer brand. So first is around inconsistent messaging. Imagine telling somebody in the hiring process about your company's commitment to work-life balance, but your existing employees consistently work significant overtime. That isn't something you're articulating and being honest about with job seekers. Then you hire someone, they come into your organization, they realize the amount of overtime that's required, they ultimately turn over. So that's an inauthentic representation of your employer brand. So you want to be honest, be transparent. Share why people are working overtime, how that's contributing to the bigger organizational outcomes, because the people that want to work exclusively the 40-hour work week might not be the right fit for you at this exact stage in building your business. And that is actually okay. We want to find the people that are looking for that bigger picture alignment. A second component that we see folks get wrong a lot is inauthenticity. And you're going to hear me talk about this a lot directly and indirectly today. Trying to be something that you're not is just going to lead to disaster. It's that simple. When you have a phony employer brand that isn't truly representative of your business, people are going to see through that. And it's really hard now in such a digital age to get away from that. So being sure that when you are messaging out to the world, you are being authentic, you are being honest and self-aware will help you to avoid that. And otherwise, you're spending a lot of time and energy and potentially money, resources, opportunity cost, building something that's only going to work against you and certainly not support your overall goals of hiring and retaining great teams. And then not considering employee feedback. Your people are really arguably your biggest amplifiers of your employer brand. So if you're not taking into consideration their feedback, what they're telling you, that can have significant negative impact for you, including if you're not keeping up as things change in your brand and in your business. All of that is going to be a red flag for you, and your people are on the front line. So listening to them and weaving in that feedback ongoing is going to help you stay on top of it and stay current and fresh. So we're going to break down the components that we know make a strong employer brand. And there's 8 of them. So there's a lot, but we're going to share examples as we go. So first is around your employer value proposition. And this is probably something that you've heard before. If you run any sort of business development function in your organization on the sales side or business side, it might also be called your unique value proposition or your business's UVP and value proposition to customers. So it's the unique set of offerings, associations, and values that positively influence your target candidates and employees. It's everything that you do to attract, engage, and retain employees. Could include things like career development, work-life balance, a strong sense of purpose. A compelling EVP will help you stand out from your competitors and attract the right candidates that, again, value what you offer. Not necessarily the same thing as your competitors, but what you uniquely offer. It has to be a clear and concise statement is the ultimate goal to get to that point of having a statement. So let's talk a little bit more about those building blocks of your EVP. So there are ultimately 8. We've got compensation. You want to have a competitive salary, bonuses, incentives, benefits like health insurance, retirement plans, paid time off, career development, training programs, promotions, opportunities, career pathing for folks, your work environment. What is your company culture like? What is your work-life balance? What are your amenities that you offer? Company values, so your overall mission and vision, corporate social responsibility, and your commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then also mission alignment. So this could also be considered a stage fit component. Again, if you have a stage in your business where you are working wild hours, then that is an expectation. Ensuring that that is something that you message. And we're going to share some examples of well-known brands that own that level of chaos. If you all think of A certain electric vehicle manufacturer, you'll know that that's very clearly a part of their EVP. They talk about that as part of working there. You're not willing to be here at least 60 hours a week, do not work here. And they have no challenge attracting the right people because it's to a bigger purpose. So consider the combination of these things. It's rarely one of these in isolation that forms the most compelling part of your EVP. It's your unique combination of these components and these building blocks that forms what makes you a compelling and unique place to work. No one is going to be exactly the same. They're just not. Even if they're the same on 5 of the 6, they're not going to be the same in where you're going and the stage that you're at and how you're getting there. So there's always an element here that you can lean on for your differentiation. So when it's done well, your EVP is going to capture value exchange, focus on uniqueness, act as an employee magnet, engage employees, and provide clarity. So what do I mean by that? Well, the value exchange piece represents that it's rarely a one-way street. There is a two-way component to this. You're giving something to your people, they're giving you something back. You want to make sure that they are contributing and you're recognizing and rewarding those contributions. Again, you need to focus on your uniqueness. And it's not any one of those things, as I already shared, it's your combination of those things that forms your uniqueness. So identifying what that is and leaning into it, and identifying, when we think about it, a competitor matrix, what is the white space? Where are there gaps that other folks are not filling that you are or could be filling from a value proposition to employees? That is going to help you identify and frame. You're an employee magnet. Compelling EVP is really going to help you attract the right people. It's going to drive employee engagement because it's going to feel like an authentic representation. And frankly, you'll see this in some of the examples we share today, the process of arriving at your employer value proposition, the process itself by engaging your people to craft it, so it's representative of them, is in and of itself as important, if not more important, than the actual outcome. It gets your internal people rallied around it, which is critical. And then finally, clarity and communication. You have to provide clarity in your EVP. It also has to be pretty simple. You want to be able to communicate it effectively across all sorts of channels. And we're going to share some examples. So do cool things that matter. This is the EVP for a very well-known technology company. Some of their key elements that they are known for is their onboarding process, professional growth opportunities, work-life balance, recognition and rewards, and straight up innovation and market leadership. Company that this belongs to? Google. You're going to see some trends here. Blaze new trails in your career. The overall journey an employee takes in the company from recruitment to exit is a big factor for this employer, also in the technology space, and they value a number of different components. This belongs to Salesforce. Netflix, their EVP statement is freedom and responsibility. Those two things look like they would be at odds, don't they? It's a bit of a dichotomy. And this is something that Netflix is well known for. And I'm going to share some more examples of Netflix shortly, because they've done a really interesting and transparent approach to both building, but also communicating and capturing culture publicly. So their key components are compensation. They have a competitive salary with performance-based bonuses, comprehensive benefits, tons of career development. Their work opportunity is a culture of openness and creativity, but also deep accountability. And their company values focus on excellence, innovation, and again, accountability. And I'm going to share some more examples of what they've done around culture shortly. A better business, a better world, a better you. This belongs to Unilever, where they value, yes, again, compensation, but also the fact that they want to create more than just a business. It's how does this benefit the world, the earth, people, customers, the team. There's a huge impact here around sustainability and inclusive work practices. So you see that reflected in how they articulate their EVP and then also how they bring it to life. So again, what you're seeing here is their EVP statement, but this is a representation of so many other components, those 6 building blocks, that is unique to Unilever in their exact combination. And then the final example, grow with us. This is an organization that, again, has been high growth. They offer a lot of things that I would say are on the front line, leading and experimenting with various employment practices around things like unlimited vacation, health and wellness benefits, continuous learning is a big emphasis, transparent and collaborative culture. Their company values spell out heart, humble, empathetic, adaptable, remarkable, and transparent. And this belongs to HubSpot. So brands most of us have heard of in a business-to-business context before, and great examples of different EVPs. All of these companies are in some way in the innovation space. Most of them are also B2B, with the exception, of course, of Netflix and Google that have huge B2C components. But it's interesting when you start to see how different organizations are capturing their employer brand and distilling it down into one unique employer value proposition statement. It's hard to get there. Simple is hard, as we all know. So diving more into company culture, I referenced already that we're going to talk more about Netflix, but your company culture is a critical part of your EVP. And we cannot emphasize this enough. I told you already, we were going to talk about authenticity quite a bit. And I don't mean to be trite about it, but it's critically important that your EVP and your employer brand is an authentic representation of what you are as a business, how you operate, your leadership style, communication practices, employee engagement and morale, your inclusion and diversity commitments. It's all about how your business overall operates. But we want to showcase your genuine culture. This allows you to build trust. When people have the same experience when they're pursuing a job as when they start working with you, that congruence validates they've made the right choice by working with you. And Netflix does a really interesting job of this. In 2009, they released a 125-page PowerPoint presentation that they called the Netflix Culture Code. It's publicly available. Happy to share links with anyone that's interested. Reach out to us at the email Erica shared. But it's super direct. It told people how they value culture, how they think about work. And over the last 15 years, they've revised it 4 times. And they just earlier this month published their most recent version. They spent 12 months engaging with their more than 13,000 employees, giving an opportunity to do what they call farm for dissent, aka find people that didn't agree. And they wanted to hear that. They received over 1,500 comments, many of which they wove into what they ultimately published. And they went from having a 125-page PowerPoint to having one simple page on a website that in a culture memo, no longer a big PowerPoint, captures and articulates what makes Netflix unique. And it's fascinating to see how it's evolved and their transparency and honesty. And one of the things that I remember from reading the first version of this so many years ago when it was first published was that it was the first time I'd seen an organization put on paper that sometimes they were going to choose to move on from you, not because you weren't great at your job, but because it just no longer fit the needs of the business. And the example they provided at the time was when they went from mailing out DVDs to everything being streaming. They had to terminate an entire division of their business. And they talk about the fact that they did it as alignment with their culture, transparently with their culture, because it no longer served the needs of the business. So it's really can be such a valuable tool when you have that degree of transparency. And I recognize that that degree of radical transparency isn't appropriate for every business, your culture, your stakeholders, your shareholders, whatever that may be. But it's still an interesting example. So aligning your employer brand with your company culture. Yeah, we've talked about it a lot, but we're going to give you some more info on that. So I'm going to start with an example. We had a client that was struggling to establish their employer brand and really didn't know where to start. They were a technology company in British Columbia, which is where I'm based, and were experiencing a disconnect in what they thought they were as a business and the perception of their brand among their target audience and candidates, which meant they were having a hard time engaging, attracting, and retaining diverse top talent. So they knew that it was going to be really important for them to continue competing for talent in this very competitive space, that they get more clarity on their employer brand. And they knew that they needed to establish a compelling narrative that resonated with potential employees and fostered workplace culture that aligned with their values. So we delivered for them. We started with a big project to understand what was true through an employer brand audit, built out their employer value proposition, the employer brand strategy, captured it all in a playbook, built out messaging guidelines, and then started pursuing employer awards for that external validation around them being a great place to work. So we were able to work with them and stakeholders throughout their more than 100-person business to understand and elicit what their value proposition was, why people chose to work there, why they stayed working there after so many years. And again, for this client, the process of getting there, engaging employees in that feedback process was as important as the outcome with the final EVP statement and those other assets and deliverables. The impact for them was that we were able to help them address immediate challenges that they were facing in recruitment, positioning them as an employer of choice in the talent landscape. They improved their candidate applicant flow and retention. improved their competitive positioning in the talent marketplace, which they heard through candidate feedback, and ultimately increased their engagement through the hiring process and results when they made offers. They saw higher acceptance rates on offers. So again, when you lead people through a journey in their recruitment process that is representative of who you are, you have better outcomes overall in recruitment. And we'll talk more about recruitment shortly. But this is a good tangible example. So alignment, why the heck does it matter so much? Well, your employer brand is one piece that fits into the broader picture. We need to make sure that it all fits together. Otherwise, it causes cognitive dissonance and it will actually turn people out of your organization. When your employer brand promises one thing, but your culture delivers another when someone joins the business, it does lead to huge problems. You have that mismatch of candidates who are going to be frustrated and leave. You're going to have high turnover and you're going to have a negative employer reputation. So being authentic will help to avoid all of that. On the flip side, there's a lot of benefits that come with having an effective and integrated approach. Attracting top talent, increasing your employee engagement, and credibility around your employer brand are just a few examples. So in aligning your employer brand, we want to start with a clear understanding of what our company culture is. That's why that audit process that you saw me talk about with that client example is a bedrock of how we always get started in employer brand engagements. And honestly, we've made the mistake of not starting there a couple of times. And now we know we will not work on projects with clients where we don't start with the audit to understand the current state of their employer brand. Because otherwise, you're not representing and reflecting the true employer brand of that business and the culture. Crafting an employer brand message that authentically reflects your culture. So again, you can be the best place to work in the world, but if nobody knows it because we're not telling that story in a compelling way, then you're ultimately not leveraging that benefit to attract and retain the right people. And then living your culture every day. So again, when they join the business, they have to live that experience that you told them they were going to have, and that makes a big impact. So let's talk a bit about employee experience. There is a full journey that we talk about in the employee experience that starts long before they work for you. It's all about how they come into your organization, the recruitment selection process, onboarding and orientation, engaging, developing, retaining, and then a feedback loop, especially in sectors like this, where we often see what we call boomerang employees. So that exit experience somebody has when they're transitioning from your business is as important as the experience they have coming into your business, because it will impact either their willingness to come back to your business and or refer other people into your business. And your employees are a phenomenal source of leads and referrals for your business. Company reputation. So this is all about how you're perceived by external stakeholders. And we all know the culprits in the employer reputation space. These are all places that people look, whether it's looking at your reviews from customers on Google, seeing what other employees say about you and or news about your business. And that's been true with lots of crises that organizations have had. And we've lived this with clients, helping them through this. We had one client in the sales space. They do direct sales, which is already a challenging industry to recruit in. And they had a significant issue. They had a poor score of employee feedback, and it was impacting their ability to hire at the volume they needed to hire. So we worked with them to build a comprehensive employer brand approach that focused on crisis management. We developed a review management strategy, deployed a targeted review campaign to be building their employer brand and their reputation with intention, and then built and maintained their presence across digital channels. So the company was also owning messaging that was going out and telling their own story, not just waiting for other people to tell it for them. And they saw huge results. In a matter of months, they increased their rating from 3.1 to 4.3, had a better reputation and positioned them as an employer of choice, and got to hire more candidates from a better qualified pool of people. So overall, a big win. And an example that I think many people can relate to. This is something many organizations battle. So communication and messaging. Your career site is one example of where you're going to be bringing your employer brand to life quite tangibly, and it should do a great job of telling your story. It's like the hub of your storytelling, and you're going to direct candidates there anytime they're looking to work for your business. So these are some examples for you of great career sites. Leadership and management, how your leadership team communicates, manages employees, supports employee development, accountability and transparency, all of that makes a difference. Around employee engagement and advocacy, much the same. When your current employees become brand ambassadors promoting your company culture and work environment, you get referrals. And your existing employees are arguably the best spokespeople for your brand when they're talking about your brand, whether it's on LinkedIn, for example, or on social media, or at events, or in their network day to day. That is a great way to start attracting a broader talent pool. And I'm sure many of you, if you looked at your data on where your best hires come from, would likely tell me that a chunk of them, if not the majority of them, come through referrals in some way. That's true almost universally. So we want to lean into that and set employees up to be great referrers for you. You can also do a good job of spotlighting your people. And these are some examples. Recognize people online. These are examples of doing that on LinkedIn. You can also make employer resources readily available through an intranet if you have one, through your, whether it's a SharePoint site, if you're on a Microsoft Outlook platform. There's a lot of ways of doing this that are internal as well, if external is just simply not authentic for your business. So these are some other examples as well. And we hear a lot about internal mobility. You want people to move up in your business for the most part. That's a core part of retention, is how you develop your people. And this piece directly correlates in with career planning and career pathing for employees. And that's a whole other topic that we're not diving into today, but an example of from a retention standpoint where you want to be leaning into employer branding. And also using your employees and capturing them for ads and some of that other external promotion when you're bringing your employer brand to life is going to do a lot to help you. We're going to dive into recruitment and onboarding. So this is just a transition moment for us, but this is a huge piece of where your employer brand is going to come to life. And as I mentioned, where most people think of employer branding overall. Very few people thought of it in context of retention. So what does it look like to bring your employer brand to life in recruitment, and how does it impact in recruitment? Well, 83% of talent acquisition leaders tell us that employer branding significantly impacts their ability to hire the right candidates. Your employer brand is fundamentally linked to your employment and recruitment process. So we've already talked about how it's going to help you attract qualified candidates, but it's ultimately essential to growing a team that reflects your company's values, reducing your turnover, and improving your employee engagement. Oh, it's going to impact in a number of ways: attracting top talent, reducing your time to hire, lowering your recruitment costs, improving that candidate experience. So the experience job seekers have when they're going through your hiring process, enhancing employee advocacy, and aligning expectations. So it has a critical role across so many aspects of recruitment. These are some examples of how you can actually bring it to life. And one of the fastest ways, and something all of you can do leaving here today, is to make some adjustments to your job ads. They're the first interaction many job seekers are going to have in interacting with your brand. They're going to see you posting on Indeed or whatever platform they may be using to look for jobs, and your job ad is going to be the first thing they see. It's an opportunity to tell your story, to weave in the values that make you unique, in how you frame and talk about your benefits, for example, in how you order information in that job ad, in adding things like an equal employment opportunity statement. There's so many small tweaks you can do, and Erica shared a link in the chat for a completely free tool that's going to give you some more tangible suggestions on things you can do today before you sign off from work today that will have a tangible and material impact on improving your job ads to better reflect your employer brand. And you don't need to wait to go through a full employer brand audit to start making these changes. Some of them are so tangible and simple to do today, like the equal employment opportunity statement, including how you message those benefits. And these are some good examples. So you see here, the equal opportunity employer statement is stated directly on their career site. We also love seeing it reflected in your job ads themselves, particularly because if somebody is looking at your job ad on a recruitment platform or a hiring platform, they might not be interacting with the full narrative on your career site. So we want to make sure that we're bridging that gap and weaving it into your job ad. Again, here, an equal employment opportunity statement. And for anyone that doesn't know, what this says is your commitment to hiring with inclusion, diversity, and equity in mind. And it also right here, something that's powerful here is, number one, not everybody in this space wants to be applying digitally. I understand that that's a real thing we're all contending with, especially in such a digital age where most of us are advertising predominantly on digital platforms. I do still hear job ads on the radio, and I know it can be very effective in certain industries, but you're also providing folks the ability to apply how they want to apply. And that's an important accessibility consideration, which we're not diving into a lot today, but is a huge government priority. And we've already seen legislation rolled out federally, with additional layers of legislation being rolled out provincially, mandating employers to think about how we are reducing barriers to employment in our workplaces. And not just for physical disabilities, for all types of disabilities. And that's, a big focus for our government going forward, and something that I anticipate you will see impact your businesses, even if you are not federally regulated, likely starting at a provincial level, but eventually coming down as a federal mandate. And for anyone that's interested in more information about that, there's also a ton of money available from government funding and grants that will subsidize you to pursue this work now. So you don't need to wait for it to be mandated. There are a lot of benefits associated with how this represents your organization's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion that are a piece of your employer brand and that ultimate narrative for your business. Your online presence, so this includes things like your career site and social media. It's not going to surprise you. People are simply online. 67% of job seekers visit your career page before they apply for a job. So lots are. A great place to tell your story, to reiterate the core things that you want them to hear. 68% of millennials visit the company's website specifically to evaluate your brand. People are looking. We are not getting away from that. People are looking. So if you are not owning your employer brand and telling them what you want to tell about your employer brand, they're telling themselves their own narrative about your employer brand. So you have an employer brand, whether you're managing it or not. So what we're teaching you is how to own it yourselves. And 83% of companies now, which is interesting as of last year, use social media in their recruiting process. And this has come way up since we first entered this field. And I'm sure many of you can relate to this in some way. This could be as simple as sharing about open jobs in your business through social media, through your LinkedIn channel, Facebook, whatever it may be. But we want to make sure that you're using social media, yes, to post when you're hiring, but more importantly, to tell the narrative about what it looks like to work in your business. What makes you unique? This is a great example of bringing your employer brand to life in a tangible way. It could be spotlighting employees. There's lots of examples that don't need to be overly involved and complex. We don't all need to spend $30,000 on a career video to be able to do this and do it well. A video on your phone with someone telling you why they love working for you can be as powerful, and some research shows even more powerful because it's perceived as more authentic than a heavily produced company video. So some elements to consider as part of your career site, and these are, you can screenshot this if you'd like. Erica may also be able to share an example for you or a tool for you to access, but you want to make sure that your career site is capturing the process to get a job at your organization. So you're managing expectations. Capture your company culture. Testimonials and employee reviews is powerful. Current career opportunities, of course, don't want to make people look for how to work for you. What's in it for me? So that's your benefits of why I should work for you. Real photos of your team whenever possible. Candidate-focused content that answers questions you know or hypothesize they have. Ask anyone who's a hiring manager or a recruiter in your business, what are the common questions they hear from job seekers? Consider answering those. List them and answer them on your career site. That transparency and commitment will go far in reflecting that you want to be a great place to work, that you want to be a place that is transparent and answers the questions and needs of your people. And then finally, consider introducing your team. At the end of the day, much like people do business with people, we also ultimately work with people. And we all know that teams are a big part of what keeps folks engaged. And people, in particular, bad managers, are also one of the number one reasons why people turn over. So consider starting to bridge that and humanize it by introducing members of your team. Some examples for you of great career sites that do an awesome job of showcasing. Great use of photos here. Some very specific language around family, which is take it or leave it, not for every employer, but clearly representative of this employer's employer brand. And you notice here, the veteran-friendly employer. That's one of their commitments around DEI, right front and center. So there's a ton of opportunity around your career sites. So an example of something we do, we want to showcase people that have worked for us and why they've loved it. So it's one of many ways you can do this, both in your career site, but then also repurposing that content across other channels. The application process is no longer a nice to have to be user-friendly. You have to have a user-friendly application process. And we see this. When we start working with companies, oftentimes we start by looking at your data, and we'll see really significant drop-offs between people that come to your career site click through to a job posting, start an application process, and then don't complete it because it was too cumbersome. So oftentimes we're starting with audits with clients when they're having recruitment challenges around what is that experience like for job seekers? Because sometimes it's a simple fix, like removing one required field that you didn't actually need off of that application. So it's something they can do from their phone, for example. So this does need to be made user friendly. We want to ultimately reduce friction because if you're getting and spending all the time and energy and resources to get people into the top of your candidate funnel, but you're not converting them, we want to understand why. And looking at your own funnel metrics of how many people are coming in, where do they drop off in that process, and why will help you triage challenges that exist for you. Your interview process, please, please, please train your interviewers. Always make sure they understand the protected grounds, things they cannot ask, but also how to facilitate a conversational interview. People don't want to be grilled, right? We don't learn a lot from people when they're being grilled. We want to set people up for success. And that can look like different things depending on your business. Some organizations are going as far as sharing interview questions in advance now. Others are taking it as a way more conversational approach where, yep, they've got guiding questions for consistency and equity in the assessment process. And others are doing none of those things and experiencing different friction. I mean, we've dealt with clients who call us up and say, I had an interviewer interviewing on a panel and they ate a sandwich in the middle of the interview. And things like that, that if that's not culturally appropriate for you, which it probably isn't for most of you, training people that that is not acceptable, but showing them what is acceptable, what you do expect from them. And that's going to be important so that you are setting clear expectations across the board. The offer letter and onboarding, people, once they make the decision to accept a verbal offer from you, this is such a great opportunity to reiterate why they're making the right choice. And we have so much fun building visual offer letters and packages for clients way beyond the basic paper. And they are always well received and do a great job of setting up people for success as they're getting ready to onboard. So for us, onboarding begins from the moment they sign an offer. You may call that period between day one and signing the offer pre-boarding. But oh my goodness, there's so much you can do there. Whether it's facilitating team introductions, asking your current team to introduce themselves or connect with them on LinkedIn, for example, asking information about that candidate and that new employee that you're sharing with your team so that on day one, they feel like they were expected, they were welcome. And those small things aren't actually so small and go so far. Again, pre-boarding, onboarding, a whole session in and of itself. We've worked with some multi-billion-dollar organizations to rebuild their onboarding processes that layer in an organizational approach to onboarding, departmental, and then role specific. So there's a lot you can do around onboarding. This is an example of our own internal offer package. We can't share client ones, unfortunately, but this is an example of the one that we use internally. And we always are willing to share resources. If you want to email us, happy to share more. And then finally, we're going to cover off a section here around bringing your employer brand to life. So yes, we've covered off a number of examples of how you can bring it to life in recruitment specifically. But we're going to talk about it even more. So you want to start by building your employer brand strategy. So what is your employee value proposition? What's the core positioning of your brand? Again, that's identifying the white space. What are the unique combination of factors that make you different? Recruitment messaging guidelines. How do we talk about ourselves as an employer? So you're setting clear expectations. And then what we call your employer brand playbook. In transparency, most organizations that are doing this on their own are going to have light touch versions of items 3 and 4. They can be quite robust, but it can also start with a culture memo, as you saw from Netflix. So it doesn't always have to be. And again, you can start small. To get here, you're doing an audit. And we have a free audit tool that we're going to share with you momentarily. But please do the audit before you are trying to figure out what your employer brand is. Because if you're not asking your people to tell you what they think, then it's not authentic. It's just not representative. You've got a sample size of 1, and you are not the only customer in the business. Some key considerations when defining your employer brand. So what are your goals for 2024 and 2025? How could your employer brand contribute to achieving these goals? Is there an element there around requiring retention or staffing up or a different profile of candidate than you've historically attracted because you're now in a different stage in your business? If you think about that top box on the different components of the EVP. What role does the candidate experience play in achieving these goals? Why are people choosing to work with your company? What makes people stay at your company? How do you think the market sees your organization as an employer? How do you want the market to see your organization as an employer? How do we close that gap if there's a big gap? And these are some of the questions that we include in our employer brand audit tool that you can use to help frame out this discovery process for yourselves. And again, it doesn't have to be totally in depth if you're a small team or an early stage company or don't have the resources for this. But asking these questions is going to help you get closer to authenticity in your brand. Another example was Share, a post-secondary institution based out of Ontario. We've worked with them for a number of years on many, many projects. This is one example of where we actually started with them with an employer brand audit, building and defining their employer value proposition and building out their employer brand strategy. They came to us because they were having a bunch of challenges with how they were perceived and the difference between how they were perceived as a university versus being an employer. And their HR department wasn't perceived as a valuable partner to hiring managers. There was a lack of internal mobility for employees, limited pipeline development, low applicant volume and quality. And these challenges presented an opportunity for an employer brand overhaul for them. They were trying to compete with large employers in their city, and they were not succeeding. So they were losing in that competition for talent, and they needed help with that. So we came in and built out through the audit process, took the time to understand, engage stakeholders across the university, and ultimately help them build out clear messaging guidelines and templates that accurately captured their employer brand. We worked with them to develop a career site in subsequent phases of this project that highlighted their unique value proposition or employer value proposition, and then conducted ongoing sessions and workshops to help communicate this throughout the business and the organization. So this resulted in having a comprehensive strategy that helped them shift those perceptions. They transitioned from being seen as a transactional service provider to a strategic partner, adding value by effectively supporting hiring needs for the people they were serving, so hiring managers. And really great outcomes across the board to increase the flow of quality and diverse talent pools. Once you've defined your employer brand, we've got to bring it to life. And that can look like many things. Internally, it can be internal alignment, newsletters, posters, brochures. Externally, it can be your career site, ad campaigns, your job ads. There's so many different ways that you can bring it to life. And many of these are included in the employer brand tools that Eric is sharing links to that, again, you can have totally for free. Final example, we're going to share a multidisciplinary engineering firm. They've grown from being a few hundred to over 1,000 employees over the last number of years. And we've been fortunate to work with them for over 5 years. And they came to us with a bunch of challenges. They were struggling to specifically hire mid-level candidates. They were pulling them away from competitors, and they were finding that they were struggling. They also had a hard time conveying their very unique internal structure. They didn't have a traditional hierarchy, and they found it hard to capture that. So they wanted to find a way to leverage their employer brand to differently tell that story. So we were able to work with them through the last 5 years and ongoing in a number of phases of this work, understanding what made them great, a phenomenal place to work. Their people love working there. So how do we help them tell that story? How do we help them communicate that externally? And we got to work with them on candidate journey mapping so that they could figure out how were people working through the hiring process in their business? How could they reduce friction for those mid-career hires? How did they have a strategy that resonated with their current team and with people? Did we build, and we built out an EVP statement for them. Building out more than that, the activation for them included social media, a new career site, employer brand video content, interview training for hiring managers, technology selection, setup, and rollout for a new applicant tracking system, as well as an HRIS, HR information system. So they were building a hub for their job seekers and employees to access information about the business. So we've been fortunate to work alongside them and have done a ton in the way of outcomes. So they tell us that it addressed their immediate needs to recruit. They were able to more quickly fill their pipeline. It increased their team growth with the right people who are thriving in their culture. They measure that through attention after 12 months. They have better consistency in their employer brand, and they've got a better employee and candidate experience through employee feedback. They've learned this. So overall, across the board, they're seeing an uptick in the core metrics that they wanted to track. And this continues to be a really fun project and client to work alongside. So some takeaways and next steps, and then we're going to open it up to questions. So your employer brand is essential to helping you attract and retain top talent. I think we've talked enough about that for that one to be obvious to you. A strong EVP will set you apart in this competitive industry. We understand that the industry itself is doing a great job of employer branding, but each of you is unique, and finding your unique combination of factors to be your employer value proposition will help you individually hire and retain great teams. It's not a one and done. Your employer brand requires ongoing investment, and that can feel exhausting. But I'll remind you that can also start really small. Your employer brand should be consistent, authentic, and real. And there is no one silver bullet, one size fits all solution. It's so often a series of small actions and tangible steps you take that are going to get you to the ultimate win. And that's what we want, hopefully, all of you to leave here with, is that even if all you do today is go and add your equal opportunity employer statement to your job ads, that is a win. That is a step toward improving your employer brand and getting to your outcomes of employee attraction and retention. Some next steps, Erica shared a ton of links in the chat throughout, and maybe we'll share some of them again. The employer brand audit tool is something many of you will find useful if you're interested in pursuing this work further. It's totally free, take a gander. And also our employer brand voice guide, so helping you build out what that messaging looks like. How do we talk about ourselves as an employer? And those are resources that are completely available to you. For anyone that is interested in more support, we'd be glad to help you. You've learned a little bit about how we work through some of those case studies we shared today, but we've been fortunate to work alongside hundreds of businesses, from early stage startups just coming out of ideas to minimum viable products, all the way up to high growth or well-established multi-billion-dollar brands, airlines, universities, trucking companies, you name it. We love working alongside companies like all of you, helping you in a way that's right-sized for your business, that's pragmatic, and takes into consideration your resources, your timing, your financial spend, and all of those factors to help you get the best impact possible. And sometimes it's as tangible as recruitment support, helping you revamp your job ads versus doing a complete career site overhaul or building high production video content. So we can do those things, but they're not always the right solution, depending on the stage, size, and needs of your business. So again, that audit process is critical, something that we can do alongside you, but also provide you with the tools to do on your own, so you can at least get started. We're going to open it up now to the Q&A. For anyone that has to drop, I want to thank you for joining us. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions, and we encourage you to download those resources. But otherwise, I'm going to open it up to the Q&A. I would be glad to answer any questions that folks have.
Yeah, we actually already have a question in our Q&A.
Yeah, I see it.
Brianna, and I think it's a great one because we have been a pretty sort of homogenous industry in the past. Building supply, you think of one thing sort of, and I think we can all picture it. But how do we sort of diversify that team? And Jane has some great questions here about how important is language and benefits around maternity leave and support for attracting high talent women to work for the industry. Can you address that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So Jane, for context, we have a huge chunk of our business that specializes in diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So working alongside businesses to build out better structure and process. We actually work alongside another very similarly dominated industry, the waterfront industry here in British Columbia, and have for the last 5 years driving DEI across that sector. So we've been through what you're talking about, including union considerations around restrictions and barriers to achieving big change on this front. But absolutely, your messaging matters. But what I would say is it's actually a step before that. It's genuinely, what are the programs that you're offering? What is your policy around work? How do we consider things like leaves? What opportunities do we provide people as they're transitioning off to leave? Are we offering top up? Can we offer a top up program? What other parental considerations do we have in place? Even beyond that, you see a bigger emphasis now on benefits that might offer fertility support, whether it's to same-sex couples or to people that are having fertility challenges in a heterosexual relationship. So you're seeing a lot of those benefits are coming to the forefront now. And absolutely, the most competitive employers will offer a combination of that. So your messaging question, excuse me, is good, but I would say it starts with, what is the actual policy? Who are we as an employer? How are we actually supporting our employees? And then how do we talk about that? How do we show examples of that, so we're not just paying lip service to it? And then the policy is one piece, but that goes back to the leadership component of your strong employer brand. Are your leaders living that? What's the reaction when somebody discloses they're having a child? Do people feel safe coming to work as who they are? Whether it's, from a different racial group or a religious minority or whatever it may be, what does that look like? So yes, messaging is a big piece of that, but where we've seen this blow up for many sectors, forestry is a great example. They talk quite publicly about their own challenges here around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and employer brand as it relates to this. But it's one thing to put messaging or lipstick on a pig, where you're saying, this is who we are, and we're so great at this, and then have people come in and find that there's no change room facilities for a woman on a job site, or there are no safety vests that are built for a woman, or whatever it may be that your factor is that you're prioritizing. We're seeing a big emphasis here as well around Indigenous truth and reconciliation. And this is a whole other subset that actually is not within the umbrella of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It tends to be its own focus area, largely at the request of different Indigenous communities across the country. But yes, you want to make sure that your policies are supportive. Then we want to make sure we are effectively communicating that to overcome different barriers that exist to people even considering a career in your industry. Yeah, Jane, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. And that's a wonderful response. So I really appreciate it. I guess I just had another follow-up to my question
Absolutely.
that maybe you could elaborate on is that like what would you respond to someone who, let's say, we're trying to propose adding new benefits or changes as a way of attracting these types of people to come and work for our companies as a way to kind of leverage and say, hey, these are our cool new benefits that we can offer. This is why you should work here. What do you say to someone who says, oh, well, people will take advantage of it?
I would ask them where their research suggests that, and I would come to them with a business case. So I think anytime we're doing change management or gaining buy-in for an idea, the more we can come with a business case around it, the more effective we're going to get buy-in from folks that are naysayers. And I would also suggest that you're looking at a decision committee often versus one decision maker. So you want to identify folks that can be champions alongside you in that cause and collectively bring it forward. But there's a way to build that business case that shows them the data that will address that concern quite objectively. And it's something that we've done a lot with various organizations across the country. So feel free to reach out. I think that's probably a broader convo, Jane, that I'm very happy to dive in and loop in some of our DEI specialists on that conversation of where we've seen success with that, because I get it. It's a real issue. And we interestingly experience versions of it certainly in individual companies, but absolutely as it relates to any of our clients that are unionized. So very happy to share some of our experiences there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I see another hand up. Oh, hi, Amanda.
Hey, I actually would love if you could maybe expand on, so let's say you've created this great brand and you've gone through this process. What does it look like when you're getting buy-in from your current employees? Because I imagine, and especially like specifically some of our retailers who they have staff who've been there for years and years and years who are dedicated and are very attached. They have staff that come in and out the door like summer students, right? That are, or
Yeah.
summer staff that comes in and they might not be at a computer where they get to see an intranet. How would you put, like, I guess, challenge these companies to go forward and actually execute and launch the brand internally?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Amanda, some of our favorite employer brand activations have happened totally offline because it's not just about your digital presence. There's so much more to it that's offline and doesn't translate the same way online. So if you look here at this example, many of the things that you see here, I would argue almost most of them are non-digital. And we've done the full list and the combinations that work for clients. There's also other ways that we want to consider around employee engagement, because that's really what you're referencing. And that again comes down to what are our policies around things like vacation time or employee development for our summer workforce? Are we accessing grant funding that we're then using to pay and subsidize training opportunities for these people? Does that become part of our value proposition? Are we then communicating that with the workforce through a poster? Are we running a challenge around the number of credits somebody can get through our own internal education program? There's so many ways you can do it. But I think when you're seeing it done well, the outcomes that you're seeing, Amanda, I think is what you're asking about. Some of the outcomes that you'll see is oftentimes, when you walk into a store and you see the people that look visibly miserable to be there, you generally know they're either having a really bad day or they're misaligned with the needs of that company, particularly if in previous experiences you haven't had that. And I also recognize that retail is having some disproportionate challenges as it relates to hiring and engaging great talent because there are so many jobs and we're having to pay higher wages. We're getting people that just simply don't want to do service work or whatever it ends up being. But that's an example of what you may see. I think the fact that you have students coming back year over year, find a way to tell that story. even if it's in a poster, if it's at your point of sale, where you have signs that say, hi, I'm so-and-so. I've worked here for this many years. I studied this in university. I'm thrilled to be back. There's so many ways you can do it that capture your people and your brand that don't have to be digital. And I think this is what I'm trying to articulate around the low-hanging fruit, the small steps forward. None of those things are grandiose, hire an agency things. Those are things many of you can do or have an intern on your team do. Heck, hire a student intern and subsidize them for 5 to 7 grand with a grant. Those grants are available every semester. Get that person to run activation for some of these initiatives with you. And whenever possible, even when we're involved in this client work, we try to enable our clients to do more of it on your own, because then you're going to do more. You're going to go further faster with your budget. So those are some very small examples, recognizing that I'm now put us over time, Amanda, but those are just a handful of examples. But oh, that's a whole fun topic to dive into. Yes, Erica, thank you. I recognize we're probably going to be wrapping up, given that we're already over time. I want to thank everyone again for joining us, and to Rebecca and Amanda for having us out today. It was a blast to be with you, and we look forward to connecting with many of you. Hope you're able to benefit from those tools and resources, and are very much an open door if you have questions or want to chat about some of those meatier issues around how do we actually become a more inclusive employer. That is a whole other topic, Amanda, that maybe we come back and talk about on its own.
Well, we really appreciate having you here, Brianna, and I appreciate Erica for sharing all these resources. We're going to make sure to send these links out in the email that we send you all after as well, but feel free to click on some of these and save them for your own use as well. And yeah, we just thank you once again for joining us today. And any questions that any of us on the chat have, please feel free to email the team or email Erica and Brianna directly. We are very willing, very happy to reach in and dig into these issues more. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.